Hello and welcome to Livewire Markets Fund in Focus. My name is Anna Dadich and I'm joined by Hugh Lam, investment strategist at Betashares. Today we're going to be talking about two funds, the Betashares Asia Technology Tigers ETF, ticker code Asia, and the Betashares Global Cybersecurity ETF, ticker code Hack. Hi Hugh, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Anna.
Let's start off with what are the roles of the ETFs that we're discussing today and how they play in a portfolio?
Sure. So Hack and Asia are what we call thematic ETFs. So their performance will really be underpinned by strong investment trends or themes. So think of things like AI, technology, robotics, and cybersecurity. Now, where thematics fit within a portfolio, they will typically have a smaller allocation within a broader investor's portfolio. So they'll be held as satellites. The core of an investor's portfolio will really be invested in broad market indices such as the ASX 200 and S&P 500.
Why would investors consider adding them to their portfolio?
Sure, there's a couple of reasons. The first one is probably to provide a return enhancer to a portfolio. So again, if you have a really strong thematic, you'll typically see performance be quite consistent throughout market cycles, and Hack is a really good example of that. And second to that, thematics can be a nice diversifier. So you will have thematic ETFs that might focus on a particular region, sector, or theme, and hold companies that you might not typically see in other parts of your portfolio. So by adding an allocation to a thematic ETF, you can diversify some of your exposure to a particular sector, region, or theme.
We'll talk about the two funds separately.
Yeah.
So let's start with Asia. Why is Asia Tech interesting right now, and why is it worth considering?
Sure, yeah, Asia's been a really interesting ETF and development that we've seen recently. China has really embraced technology as a strategic priority over recent months. And if we think about the driver of the Chinese economy over the past decade or so, it's really been driven by exports and manufacturing in low value goods. And we're starting to see a lot of that competitive advantage wane, and they go to neighboring countries in Vietnam and Indonesia, for example. And so China really has to think of ways they can focus on to improve the long-term growth trajectory of its economy, and technology is a really, really important area. And why is that? It's because it can really provide productivity gains for businesses. By employing technology and AI, businesses can produce more goods at a fraction of the cost. And also wages are beginning to rise in China as well. And again, technology can help to mitigate some of those headwinds as well. And so what we've seen actually in the chart that we have is an outperformance of Chinese equities so far this year. So the MSCI China Index has actually outperformed US shares or the S&P 500 by about 20%. That's a huge sort of outperformance that we've seen in just 3 months alone of this year. It's really coincided with the release of DeepSeek. So DeepSeek was an AI model released by a Chinese startup a couple months ago. It was trained on more efficient, cheaper NVIDIA chips. And we've seen a real take of optimism in the Chinese technology sector. We've also seen developments in companies like Alibaba. They've partnered with Apple to deploy AI features on their iPhone in domestic China. Tencent is also a really good example as well. They've utilized AI to monetize advertising revenues. And finally, Xiaomi as well. They've really transformed from a domestic smartphone manufacturer to a world-leading EV producer as well.
Which companies do investors get exposure to via this ETF?
Sure, yeah, so I mentioned some of those companies, so Alibaba, Tencent, and Xiaomi, but Asia provides exposure to not just Chinese technology shares, but also technology shares in other neighboring Asian countries such as Korea and Taiwan, for example. So some other companies include Taiwan Semiconductor. So they're the largest contract chip manufacturer in the whole world. So what that means is that they produce all the chips that NVIDIA designs. So they're critically important to the broader semiconductor supply chain. We also have companies in there like Samsung and SK Hynix. I'm sure many people are aware of who Samsung is, but Samsung and SK Hynix really provide the memory chips that go into the NVIDIA GPUs there. So memory is a really important aspect of semiconductor chips, and those two companies alone have a really large dominance within memory. So there are a few examples of companies that you might find in Asia.
Okay, so can you tell me about how the ETF has performed and what the fees are?
Yeah, so Asia's done really well over the last year to today. At the time of recording, it's done 35%. And year to date, that is from the start of this year till now, it's done about 11% as well. The fees on this fund is 67 basis points, or that's 0.67% every single year.
Okay, great. Now let's talk about our second fund. We'll talk about cybersecurity and Hack. If you could talk us through the evolution of cybersecurity as an investment thematic.
Sure. Cybersecurity has been a really strong investment thematic, and it's played out over many, many years, but we've seen a real resurgence recently, and it's driven by two main factors, I would say. The first one is to do with AI and the advancement of technology. So we all know AI can be very beneficial to businesses and consumers. We use it in our everyday lives to improve productivity, to do more things out of the day. But what we've seen on the flip side is that bad actors and adversaries are using that very same technology to attack very vulnerable network systems and critical infrastructure. So there was a recent case with Salt Typhoon. So they're a Chinese state-based actor. They actually hacked into the AT&T infrastructure system in the US. So there's been a few big cases of that happening. And then secondly is that we're in an increasingly geopolitically fragmented world. So we've got countries like China, the US, Russia, Ukraine, really come at conflicts in recent years. And this backdrop is causing a lot of uncertainty across businesses and governments worldwide. They're really looking to protect their data, and that's where cybersecurity comes in. We've also got another chart that shows spending in security is expected to grow by double digits annually to 2028, and that the amount of spending is expected to exceed $260 billion in this year alone, and that's according to Morgan Stanley research. So all of that money will really support the incumbent leaders in the cybersecurity ecosystem, and those two companies are primarily CrowdStrike and Palo Alto. We've also seen businesses start to consolidate the amount of cybersecurity products they currently have from about 80 to 100 down to about 10 or 15. And again, they're really looking to the biggest dominant players in the market, and right now that's in CrowdStrike and Palo Alto.
They're very big numbers that you've mentioned. So which companies do investors get exposure to via this ETF?
Those two companies I mentioned are obvious examples. They're top 5 holdings within Hack. CrowdStrike really focuses on what we call endpoint security. So anything to do with like your devices, smartphones, etc. It's really protecting data on the device and endpoint systems. And then Palo Alto focuses on what we call network security. So all the sort of ports and infrastructure networks that a company might deploy. Palo Alto is a really good sort of provider of cybersecurity systems. Now, some other companies include Infosys, Broadcom, and Zscaler as well.
Okay. So same question as for the Asia Fund. How has Hack performed and what are its fees?
Sure. It's the same fees as Asia. So again, 67 basis points or 0.67%. Hack has done 22% over the last year, and it's been an incredible fund of ours. It's recently reached $1.2 billion in assets under management. So it's been a really, really strong thematic fund and the biggest one in Australia, actually.
Finally, where can investors get more information about both funds?
We have a website, so www.betashares.com.au. That's probably your best source of info for these funds. We also have fund-specific pages for Hack in Asia, and also a insights page as well. So if you wanted to learn more about insights into what's happening in the market or certain trends or themes like cybersecurity or Asia technology, you can certainly visit the content section of our website. But yeah, that's where you can find us to find out more.
Hugh, thank you so much for sitting down with Livewire today.
Thanks for having me, Anna.
If you enjoyed that interview as much as I did, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel where we release new content every week.